I would love for that to be a take-home message for other folks as well, that we want our athletes to be getting enough to eat. So thanks, Coach.
Like I said, I'm going to make it pretty simple. She talked about it to the audience. Eat something. That's all I'm going to say. Don't show up without eating anything. Go eat something. Anna, again, what we're talking about, and I led with Rachel on purpose because I know her passion on that particular subject about just getting enough to eat. But why we do this is so that we can fuel our activities and recover. So the next three guys, I want you to talk about that. So Anna, you go first.
Yeah, of course. I'll kind of segue what Rachel said. I mean, one of the things that I do with my athletes is just show them what their needs look like. I don't, as a dietitian, like to preach or hound on calories because I like to teach also the athlete to listen to their body and some intuitive eating skills. So I like to mesh the two together so that they feel that they have enough knowledge to know that, hey, I really do move my body enough to need 4,000 to 5,000 calories. And that isn't crazy, even though like the normal American culture is 2,000 calories, right? So just making them feel comfortable and educated that 4,000 to 5,000 calories is not crazy, and that they do need that. Compounding that with a lot of these athletes that we work with are still growing, right? So we even have to add in growing calories and helping them understand that that is a huge part of their fueling so that they can just even train to perform well. So like I mentioned, I show them what the calorie needs look like, but then also show them show them how to connect that with intuitive eating. And what I mean by intuitive eating is helping them make connections such as, are you sitting in your 10 a.m. class with your stomach growling? Okay, does your stomach growl when you're on the football field, right? Like I've had professionals say that their stomach's growling on the football field. Like, okay, well, let's talk about that. Did you have anything? Did you eat lunch? So there's just ways to ask them questions like, was your stomach growling? Do you get hungry? Do you feel sluggish? And then be able to help them see the picture that they're not getting in enough. Even if, they live in a culture of, again, Americans eat 2,000 calories a day, and that's supposed to be what we do. So they can start to see that, okay, they are different because they are a collegiate athlete or a professional athlete or an adult athlete. And that makes their needs different as well.
Okay. Well, I know Mike runs into some slightly different scenarios because there could be a defensive lineman that needs to maintain his weight and an offensive lineman that maybe needs to watch out about gaining too much weight. And there's just, or you have what I call a bottom heavy tight end that could be a tackle in a heartbeat. If you don't, if he doesn't understand how he needs to eat. And, so Mike, talk to us about fueling for those guys, but also paying attention to, where you need to be to play the game as an athlete.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love what everybody said. And, obviously Rachel leading that off, because I think it really comes down to energy balance is what we're talking about. And that's kind of what our whole job really, what we encompass, all the programming around everything we do is really to reach energy balance. That's food availability and all those things that we do. Obviously I think football, everybody works, has worked in sports and things like that. I think football is obviously, I think everybody probably at least has been in the football culture where weight, body weight and body composition is still very, it's under a microscope, especially from the coaches and front office. And I think is good reason for some of it. I think some of it's probably overblown a little bit, but it's such a unique setting because we do really need guys to be in specific ranges. But I almost think of it like periodization around the seasons, where in the off season, when we're at a competition, that's really where we want to focus on reaching those goals. So if a guy has, a goal to lose 10, 15 pounds, which he might, which is a lot of weight, even maybe 20 pounds, like we need to accomplish that in the off season when we're not, playing games, when training load on the field is a lot less. And then, once we get in season, especially training camp, we have the guys come back and report. If a guy's 20 pounds overweight during training camp, now we're in a real conundrum because he's over his playing weight, which could potentially affect his play, his speed, agility, endurance, and things like that. But now we're running into these fueling issues where now he's in a caloric deficit. And just like Rachel mentioned, all those negative side effects of being in a caloric deficit, especially chronically. So now we're trying to balance that. So in an ideal world, you don't want to ever be in that situation, but we all know we do get in that situation. So we really try to, do it as safe as we possibly can. But it's a challenge. And I think that's kind of why we do daily weigh-ins and weigh-outs during training camp, obviously from a hydration standpoint, but really can get our eyes on guys and not let anybody slip through the crack in terms of guys that might be trending downwards. Because if you see a guy trending downwards over time, over days and weeks, then they're under fueled, and they're in a caloric deficit. And then once we get in season, that's really what we're worried about. Like when it comes to guys gaining weight, we actually kind of like to see that over the course of the season, a 17-week season, because then we know, the energy balance is being reached. Really what we try to navigate, we try to identify are guys that are losing weight. So we might flag a guy that has lost 2% or more of his body weight from the time he reported, and that at least creates a conversation about their fueling habits. Are they doing that on purpose? If they're not, why is this happening? And then we can kind of get into more individualized, fuel plans and things like that. So, I think it really is all encompassing, is that energy balance piece and just making sure guys are eating enough. I mean, when it comes down to the end of the day, that's our job is food availability and making sure they have access to everything they need, especially across all the different body compositions and energy needs.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's some great information there from Mike Menace. Adi?
Yeah, I mean, great points brought up so far. And I think we'd be remiss to not also mention that athletes are not exempt from the diet culture world we live in. And so like Anna said, being able to turn that word calorie from a, scary, like these terrible things that come in at night and stitch your clothes tighter, whatever kind of memes that are out there, to energy, it is the energy that I'm receiving and how do I nourish my body to meet my goals. And so what are the eating patterns looking like? And again, around, periodizing and making sure that they are meeting the needs of, do I have a morning practice and then an afternoon lift, or vice versa, or multiple throughout the day? And is, like everyone is saying, right, am I in that energy balance? Do I have the fuel that my body needs and that my brain needs in order to really sustain what I'm asking my body to do? And so making sure that all of those pieces are there across the board. But it's really hard to do that because not only are there all those messages in athletics, but there's all these messages in the world that athletes are not immune to of, calories are bad and, eat less, or fats are good or bad, carbs are good or bad, all of these things. So being able to really, again, making sure that they're getting their nutritional needs met, and really neutralizing that language around food, or hopefully turning it into a more positive message so that food really is this thing that we're using as a tool and not something that's getting in the way of reaching someone's goals.
That's a great segue into our next conversation topic, which is diet culture in sports. So diet culture in sports, and then let's go ahead and tie supplementation in there, and to be or not to be, or need or needed, not needed. Did I say that right? Needed or not needed. There we go. So do you need to supplement? What is proper supplementation? Yada yada yada. Because there's a whole culture around this as well, and it ties into the diet culture a lot. Mike, you want to start that one off?
Sure. I think when it comes to diet culture, what comes to my head first is how easily they're just like everybody else. Just like, Dee said, they're human beings, like they're just like us. So they're easily influenced by social media, by their friends, by their family. So they hear the same stuff we hear. And so I feel like, another part of our job is to really be that kind of that sounding board for the athletes or our clients about things they hear, and then able to, be the voice of reason and science and truth. But also part of that is like, for all the things that we hear so asinine, I do feel like it's important that we don't always just shut down everything they hear as just ridiculous and it's only our way. You know what I mean? I do feel like there's something to be said about like meeting athletes in the middle, or at least giving them, okay, if that's not the way to do it, then what is the way to do it? Giving them a solution or a different option instead of being like, no, that's so stupid. Like, don't do that diet or don't take that supplement. giving them some type of reason why, and just, you know what I mean? I think that was one thing I made a mistake early in my career, was just, I know this and that, and I just need to listen to me, and I'm not going to give you any reason. Just trust me.
Right.
I think that just doesn't go very well, because then they're just going to stop coming to you, and they're going to start taking that thing, or they're going to start doing the diet anyway. So I think that's the first thing, is just, us just being that resource there. I think that's a big part of what we do. And I love it too, because I feel like you learn a lot. There's sometimes I hear stuff and I didn't even know that was
right.
something that's being talked about. So then you got to kind of be on your toes a little bit and be able to kind of, go get that answer or do a little research. Supplement wise, I know it's a polarizing topic. I think there is a place for supplements. I think you can kind of count them on one hand. The ones that I'm, a proponent of or a fan of, or whatever you may be, is whey protein. And I think really just because protein needs are so high in athletes, and I'm also biased because my athletes are, 300 some pounds. So that is hard to do through Whole Foods. It just is. And so like whey protein is a great, again, supplement if they need it. Not everybody needs it. For most people, you don't need whey protein, but I think for this population specifically, I do think it can help get those protein needs, higher. I do think creatine monohydrate has a lot of utility, I think, across a lot of populations, specifically football, from a strength power standpoint. Omega-3 fatty acids, I think there's an argument for that, especially for athletes that don't eat fish. And even athletes that do eat fish, I think it's pretty hard to get, that omega-3 index high enough without supplementation. Vitamin D, I think everybody's talked to that until they go blue in the face. And then I think magnesium is one too that's pretty interesting. Just from some of the blood testing, I know Anna mentioned like some of the lab work and stuff, and just some of the blood work I've seen, I feel like it's hard for guys to get enough magnesium, dietary magnesium, at least to reach adequate levels. So those are kind of one, again, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I guess supplements, 5, 6 supplements that probably have some pretty good utility in football. Everything else is kind of just that extra bonus stuff. Not that their other ones are bad, but those are kind of the main ones off the top of my head.
Well, for our audience, I want you to take note of two things that Mike did say that I think is important. Not for everyone, but for those guys who need it. And when that's said, I always, the first thing that pops to my mind is, how do you know you need it? How did you get tested? Because you don't need, if there's no assessment and you're just taking it because the guy down at the gym said so, and not someone like the professionals we have with us today, then you're probably out of bounds. That's my opinion, not the opinion of the show, just one of the hosts. And I'll go to Rachel for now because you don't want to hear from me.
Of course we want to hear from you.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, I certainly support those 4, 5, 6 supplements with Mike's, additional context there. Also, I work with a lot of female athletes, so I might add in a couple of supplements that might be a little bit more female specific, and that's an iron supplement. So when I was at UNC Chapel Hill, we had a pretty intensive iron protocol, we called it, where we would screen all of the incoming athletes, female athletes plus male cross-country athletes, to assess those ferritin levels. And
what about wrestlers? I'm sorry. What about wrestlers?
They can certainly be, all athletes can be an increased risk for iron deficiency, right? Like the high energy needs, all that pounding on their body can break up those red blood cells and require, additional hemoglobin. So certainly I would love it if all athletes could check out their iron levels, if that's something that's accessible to them with their time and their budget and their healthcare access. I think it can certainly be helpful to check in on. Iron deficiency anemia is the most prominent deficiency in the world, and the most prominent deficiency among female athletes. So, like I said, at UNC Chapel Hill, we check out that ferritin when they got there, and we did some formal iron education with them throughout the year. We'd come in specifically just for an iron talk, just kind of a quick hit, this is what iron is. This is how, your body uses it. This is why it's important. Here are some iron-rich foods. And for those of you who need it, the athletics firm provided a supplement for them, which I know a number of other, major universities do that as well. So I think an iron supplement may be helpful, after getting those labs checked out. And then another supplement that I might add on is potentially a calcium supplement, especially for athletes that may have a history of a bone injury. So in addition to talking about vitamin D again for the 1000th time, that can certainly be helpful for our bone health. And potentially adding a calcium supplement, especially for those athletes that may be lactose intolerant or just would benefit from an additional calcium supplement. So just some other supplements for your listeners to think about, to consider, to ask their healthcare provider about. Yeah.
Okay. Anna, your thoughts?
Yes. I guess, well, number one, I agree with all the supplements that they mentioned. I work a ton with iron because I have a large endurance population that I work with. So a ton with iron. I obviously see a lot of vitamin D too. So the one thing I was going to say though is that you mentioned not just taking a supplement because someone at the gym is doing it, and like actually knowing why you need to take it or work with someone. So I just wanted to mention that it is so much easier. Like I'm jealous of athletes that are growing up right now and the access to professionals that they can have that I didn't have growing up in the middle of nowhere, Illinois. Right? I didn't grow up in an area where there was a strength coach, where there was a dietitian, where there was even an athletic trainer in our town. I think we got one from EIU only on footballs for football. So we had zero access to any of that. But athletes these days can find a sports dietitian on Instagram. They can find a strength coach on Instagram. Like they can find literally everything they need. Obviously, they need to do their due diligence and figuring out if that person's credible and if they should work with that person. But I'm just so jealous of the high performance virtual coaching that you can get as an athlete these days. I just think that it takes that small town kid and actually elevates us and gives us some training and knowledge that we could actually compete against those schools and cities where they have all the resources. So anyway, that's my shout out to anyone who's wondering, like, am I iron deficient? Do I need calcium? Work with a sports dietitian. The sports dietitian will guide you and help you get your labs done, whether that's through your physician and through your insurance or through a third party. I use Inside Tracker with a lot of athletes because I just get a lot more labs. And then I get to see them firsthand versus having to go through a doctor, but both work really well. And then the dietitian gets to guide you on what to take and how it plays into your sport and when to retest. And just, anybody can have that service, and it's just super, super awesome. Okay.
Well, that's some great information as well. And what we hear there is, again, get an assessment and then understand why you're taking something. D, you got D. Do you have something to add to that?
I do. I mean, I think everyone hit all the nails on all the appropriate heads. And then the only thing I would add in there is that, again, it's big picture. And, everyone wants there to be a black and white response of like, yes, this is good. No, it's bad. Yes, this is right. No, it's wrong. But like everyone's saying, it is so dependent. And I think the big thing that kind of sticks with me is that, like, taking a supplement when you don't have appropriate nutrition is like a Band-Aid on an open wound. If you're like saying, well, I'm waking up and having, a slice of toast, and then like lunch is like, a salad and chicken, and dinner might be a grilled chicken and broccoli. Clearly not enough nutrition. And then, I'm going to take this caffeine supplement to give me energy. Well, caffeine is not the calories that your body needs to nourish itself. And so you need to have that baseline of nutrition. And with that baseline of nutrition, then there are those supplements that are going to really help giving that extra edge that we want our athletes to have, we want our humans to have. But without that appropriate nutrition underneath, a lot of this is kind of where we have a lot of tools without the people, the builders to build the house or fuel that energy. And so again, I think to tie it back into the diet culture piece is that there's this idea too that, anyone that eats knows what everyone else should eat. Anyone that looks a certain way, if I eat that way, I'm going to look like that. And that's just not the case. We know we have a lot of people that just genetically look the way that they look, and then use that to capitalize on their genetics to then sell these supplements to everyone else to say, well, if you just, take this and I take this every morning, then you can look like me. When we know that we have a variety of people and a variety of shapes and sizes, that nutrition needs to be individualized to the person. And just because Joe Schmo down the street said so doesn't mean that that's going to work for the person next to them.
Joe Schmo down the street.
Response that everyone wants to hear of, like, should I do it?
She said,
the answer is it depends, right?
She said Joe Schmo down the street.
I sure did.
So I'm gonna break it down for Joe Schmo, okay? When to eat, what to eat, how to eat, why to eat, and don't supplement a lack of knowledge. Supplement the knowledge of what you already eat. So if your nutritional habits are not good, then supplementation will likely be ineffective. Can I say it that way? Is that I'm not a dietitian. All you guys know better. Can I say it that way? If you don't eat well or you don't eat enough, but you try to supplement at that point, are you helping yourself? So
yeah, it shouldn't be in replacement of your nutrition. And that's to say too, Mike made a great point, like whey protein for athletes that have really high nutritional needs and high protein needs, super helpful supplement. And then I'd also say if someone, are athletes that aren't going maybe to the dining hall right after class and do need a quick, boost of protein to make sure that their protein and carbs to, rebuild that muscle and restore those fuels that they just had at their workout, they might benefit from a, nutritional supplement as far as a drink, a drink that has those carbs and protein to get them to that next meal. So it's just such a nuance, like it depends. The situation totally calls for different things for different people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Anna, you're going to start this one off. Nutrition and chronic disease with high-level athletes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I actually did.
You like that one? You want me to say that one again?
I did want to say I really liked what Mike said about not just putting down everything that athletes come to you with as far as like the nutrition trends and diet culture. I totally felt the exact same way at the Colts when, a new Netflix documentary would come out and you're like, oh man, I have to rebuttal this now. So I think one of the things that dietitians are doing really well is getting in the area of where those messages are coming from. And a lot of that's TikTok or Instagram. So I think continuing to be able to push your athletes to, hey, maybe follow some more sports dietitians and less influencers. Or just, even for the younger generation, like just knowing, like, where is it you learn about that information? Like, what is a sports dietitian? I think that that's really important that high school kids know, where to get that info from. So yes. All right. So nutrition for chronic disease and high level.
Yeah. Chronic diseases and for high level athletes, chronic disease, type 2 diabetics, lipidemia, you might have Graves' disease or things along those lines where, athletes have functioned with them their whole life. But when they're young, it's your body kind of helps you out. Your youth kind of helps you out. As you get older, you might be a type 2 diabetic or you might be a type 1 diabetic. And now you have a whole different scenario that you have to deal with. We'll start there, then we'll go to Mike, and then we'll go to Adi, and then Rachel, you get this one last.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm seeing in my adult athletes that I'm working with currently. And I could even put myself in that category. I get my labs done every 6 months just to continue to know that I am really still taking care of myself. Even though I train and I eat well and I sleep well. I am having several adult athletes who are in that higher cholesterol, high triglycerides. I was honestly really surprised, even the high blood pressure. I really didn't think that would be something I would see for as active as these athletes are. But then again, you just have to really put it into perspective. Like, it seems like they're really active, but they're also just really active for an hour and a half a day. And the rest of the day, they're sitting at a desk. So that's where, I don't know, that was something that I feel like I had to transition from working with collegiate athletes and professional athletes that are, walking to class all day or on a campus or have 2 workouts a day, just a lot more demand on their body and a lot higher need to maybe the adult athlete or the, retired football player that, they are sedentary with activity mixed in. So that's something to look at is their overall just activity changes, which can have a result in some of these chronic disease states that we see. Nutrition, some of the athletes that I'm working with right now, like they fill out food logs for me and their nutrition is so good. So that's where I'm trying to dig a little deeper. Like, are there, a couple weekend beers I'm not seeing, or just additional like alcohol, stress, job stress? Like, what is it I'm not seeing that's reflecting in your lab values right now? That we can put the full picture together versus just saying it's your nutrition. You had, I don't know, just not a perfect diet, right? The athlete that I'm personally thinking of, I would say is like 85% awesome diet, and I don't really want to nitpick somebody's diet to the point of being 100% amazing, right? We all have to live within a healthy balance. So that's where I'm trying to look at the full picture like I would an athlete and think of what's their sleep like, what's their stress level like, what's their full day of exercise and lifestyle like, and then how is that all impacting their lab values, and what are realistic things that we can look at. And I will say in this population, I've started using more supplements, things like garlic, omega-3s, some supplements that I really wouldn't have gone to that area with my younger population because diet, nutrition would have cleared things up. So I'm weighing in a lot more of the herbal supplements in this older adult population.
Okay. That's interesting. But we'll try to get back to that anyway. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really, I'm working with guys that are, 21 to maybe 35. So like a really pretty small window. So like we'll see some, kind of isolated events. Like we'll get some autoimmune stuff like celiac or something like that. Had a few guys with type 1 diabetes, but this is honestly like a shout out to collegiate dietitians, because I feel like every person with a type 1, a type 1 diabetic comes in, they're so well managed already. I feel like the collegiate dietitians do a fantastic job with their type 1 diabetics. So we really they pretty much know what's going on. Like we're pretty hands off with those guys if they need something.
So they're self-managing, huh?
Yeah. Pretty because if they've made it, this far and they've been playing football for 10 plus years, like they kind of got a pretty good routine. So like by the time they get to us, and like I said, a lot of them just did such a good job in college, I feel like. So that's a kind of kudos and shout out to a lot of the collegiate RDs in football. So that, that's the kind of stuff like we look at like hemoglobin A1C, and like I've never seen a guy over 5.3. Obviously, like, are those guys at risk later? Maybe. Like some of the guys that are 350 plus pounds, like if they continue to eat like they do now without the activity, then obviously we could run into issues later. But from like our window, the acute window, we don't really see a lot of that. So, we don't, in this specific setting, we don't see a lot of chronic disease stuff, a lot more just acute stuff that pops up.
Okay. So, for our audience, it's not to say that it won't happen to you or can't happen to you. It's just that you got to remember to make those changes when your activity levels or your training levels, if you want to talk directly to athletes, when your training levels change and you're down to 1 30-minute workout before you go to the office a day, you can't keep taking in 4,000 calories a day. Rachel?
So I'd love to kind of talk about this nutrition for chronic disease and also talk about diet culture. I just realized I kind of missed my opportunity to talk about diet culture.
Just do it all, Rachel. Just go ahead. Just,
supplements.
You want the rest of the show? No, I'm just kidding.
But so athletes that may be struggling with these chronic diseases, maybe type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, that's tough. That's hard on the ego. Like it's confusing to them. It's, and then also just like the athlete population in general, athletes want to be optimizing their nutrition. Athletes with chronic disease, they want to be optimizing their nutrition. So I think that particular population, they're going to be vulnerable to those messages from diet culture. And diet culture loves to oversimplify nutrition. The diet culture is this system of beliefs that we're all swimming in, whether we know about it or not, that loves to put certain foods on a pedestal and the end all be all and the cure all. And then diet culture also loves to like demonize certain foods or nutrients or ways of eating. And so I think those, athletes that are really vulnerable to like wanting to optimize their nutrition, or they have that chronic disease and they want that, like that thing, what do they have to do? That they can kind of get confused and get stuck in kind of that hierarchy of foods. So also to like Anna's and Mike's point earlier that like athletes, are swimming in diet culture. They have a lot of questions and concerns about these nutrition messages, these contradictory nutrition messages. And I think us as sports dietitians and also strength coaches, athletic trainers, like listening to athletes and their concerns about their chronic disease or about their body composition or their energy levels, to like listen and help the athlete like feel seen, feel heard, and maybe like validate how they're thinking, they're feeling, so that they can feel heard and feel seen, and so that they kind of you can build that rapport with that athlete and build that trust, so that when we do guide them to those sports nutrition priorities of having adequate nutrition, consistent nutrition, that balance, that variety, incorporating, those supplements when needed, incorporating fruits and vegetables, when they can, that can be really helpful for the athlete's performance and also overall for reducing that risk of chronic disease. So I just kind of wanted to talk about those two things together, but I think, just to validate for all of the listeners too, that may have a lot of questions and concerns about nutrition, like, yes, it is really, really hard to figuring out how we can take care of our bodies and any of our chronic diseases when there's so many mixed messages out there.
Right. I think this is when we started talking about doing these roundtable series, one of the, I think, Rachel, we were just finishing your filming session with our regular episodes. And I asked you right there on the spot, how do you think something like this would be, if you thought it would be informative to our audience? Well, we're listening to it. Today we're doing it because I think it's important. And we have perspectives from all you guys. And Adi, I didn't forget you on this one. We have perspectives from all you guys that I think our listeners are really appreciating right now. For our young, I call them fire breathers that think they're going to be in the NFL one day. That's a whole nother podcast. But for those guys, the validation is here with Mike. For all other athletes, all you guys have worked at the collegiate level. Now you're working privately. So from our perspective as a show, we appreciate you coming on. Now, Adi, weigh in on that chronic disease and high-level athletes from your perspective.
Sure. I think it's been touched on kind of lightly, but I think the piece that's really important to remember is that nutrition is one aspect of the whole picture, right? And so when maybe the labs aren't looking quote unquote perfect, or things feel a little off, or we're kind of getting a new diagnosis or things like that, we of course want to look at that nutrition. But like Anna said, and I think it's been mentioned a couple other times, like, what are stress levels looking like? What's sleep looking like? And I think really looking at behavior patterns versus kind of those versus only weighing in on those outcomes is so important, because across the board, whether someone has high blood pressure or has high blood sugars or has, a variety of